I've done a lot of violent stuff. Obviously, we've used guns, knives, hammers, baseball bats. You know, obviously, when you're getting money off people, then obviously you have to make a statement of how you want that money. My name is John Burton. I was a career criminal from the age of 11 upwards. I was head of an organised crime group, and I'm here to answer the questions in the honesty box. Why didn't you make better choices and avoid crime? I did. It just took me 40 odd years to do it. I got involved in crime at an early age due to obviously our parents and stuff not having full-time employment, and Liverpool at the time was a little bit tricky in the 70s. And when you want new trainers, new tracksuits and a bike or something, then obviously you get involved in crime to do it, and that's what I did.
What's your earliest memory of your interactions with the police?
Probably about when I was 8. Just robbing cars and stuff like that. Where I lived in between Everton and Liverpool's ground, everyone used to park all their cars on our estate or the next estate, and you'd mine cars. And if the guy ever come back and didn't give you 50p or £1, believe me, his car would be getting smashed the week after and cost him a hell of a lot more money. And you guarantee you that the week after that he'd give you a £5 for minding his car. How did you smuggle drugs into the country? God, I've done about a million ways I've done it. Whether it was in lorries, whether it was flew in planes, everything, if it was coming in lorries, would have a smother in it. So it'd be in like 3-piece suites, wooden units. I've even had it in rolls of silk. I've had it in water boilers. You know, anything that we knew we could smother stuff in and get it in. And my motto was always never to put too many drugs in one haul, because the more drugs you put in, the easier to find. What was the most money you had at one time? We were turning over probably between about 8 and 10 million pounds a month. So at one time we probably had 10, 11, 12 million in one of our stash houses in suitcases, probably about 300 or 400 grand in each suitcase. You know, you've got to remember that when you're young and you're in your 20s, say for when we were doing the cigarettes, to have that much money and to just see it like that, then obviously it is a buzz, because you know your loads come in, you know you've sold your load, and now you're counting the money. So for me, that was job well done.
Can you just elaborate on what the cigarette business was?
Yeah, cigarette business was importing cigarettes from out of the UK, bringing them in. They were all duty frees at the time. They were probably about £16 a packet then. So estimated 30,000 sleeves a day, you're probably talking about, what, 480 grand? The first time I ever counted 480 grand, it took me about 9 hours. And obviously hence why I invested in counting machines, just to make life a little bit easier. And you'd always see it in like Narcos Mexico or Narcos, where people are in hot pants and a bra top counting money or doing drugs. Then obviously we had 4 people who used to wear bras and shorts counting money. And you know what? It did used to go missing sometimes. Why did they call you Juice Bomb John? Actually, my name's Bath Bomb John now. It was Juice Bomb John because I was using that many steroids. Obviously, every week we were putting mills in here, mills in there, mills in everywhere. And before you knew it, I was probably a big lump, and hence that's where the name Juice Bomb John come from.
How big were you?
Anything between 15 and 18 stone, depending on what steroids we were taking. Because you can't really go knock at someone's house 10 stone and ask for your money, but at 18 you can probably just walk right through it. So yeah, it was all about intimidation as well, yeah. What's the most violent thing you did as a gang boss? I've done a lot of violent stuff, and my mates and my people who were with me have done a lot of violent stuff. Obviously, we've used guns, knives, hammers, baseball bats. You know, obviously, when you're getting money off people, then obviously you have to make a statement of how you want that money. So I have done a lot of violent things to people, and you know what, I'm ashamed of a lot of that I've done. But when you're in that world, then it's either them or you, and that's what you have to remember. If you owe money to people, then it's going to come back on you.
What was your weapon of choice?
Depends where you were going, but I'd say a Kosh would always be your weapon of choice. Snub-nosed 38 would always be a weapon of choice because it's easy, concealed and small. 9 times out of 10, obviously as you were getting older and earned more money, then obviously you would pay people to go and do this for you. You wouldn't get involved in it yourself. Who were your clients? Anyone who smoked, anyone who took drugs, anyone who went to a rave. I didn't ever get involved in heroin or crack. I always think them two drugs are drugs that you don't really want to be getting dealt with. All my drugs that we sold were recreational drugs until we got a bit older and we were importing bigger amounts of Class A's and Class B's.
What does a drug taker look like?
It depends really. Anyone who's taking ecstasy or smoking weed and stuff, it's really pretty hard. You just be a normal man on the street to be doing that. I always feel that if you're just a weekend drug party, then obviously you'll never know what they get up to Monday to Friday because they're looking like normal people. But if you're smoking crack and taking heroin or putting heroin through a needle, then obviously you can see straight away what people are using. You can tell what type of person they are and what drugs they take. Did you have any rules on who you sold to? Yeah. Everybody we sold to had to come, were recommended via someone safe. If a normal man on the street come up to us and saying we knew you're involved in ciggies, we want to try and buy some off you, I'd just say, I don't know what you're talking about. If it would come recommended off one of my punters, we'd have a meeting with them and we'd make our minds up from there. One thing I would never do is sell drugs or cigarettes to kids. We just sell to people we knew and older people. What's actually in pills? MDMA. So MDMA is the drug that gets people happy and, you know, gets people dancing and gets them in a really good mood. We had a pill making machine, which was a Mitsubishi machine, and we did use MDA in it, but we also put speed and other substances in it to downgrade the strength of the tablet, but to maximise and get another load of tablets on top of that. So if you were to make 10,000 tablets normal, you'd probably get 15,000 with a little bit more different substances going in it. What's the most violent thing you've seen? I've seen shootouts. I've seen people get shot and I've seen people be dead on the floor. So I've seen people with a hole in their head and dead. I've seen people who've been stabbed, who've been sort of killed straight away. And like I always say to the young lads now, you know, you pull a knife out and the person next to you pulls a knife out, you've got two choices. You run away or you stay and fight and you use it. And unfortunately, one of you is going to come out and one of you is not, probably. I think seeing someone with a hole in their head, obviously you never forget that. You know, so for me, I think it would probably be that, seeing a shootout and seeing the after effects of it. So, you know, for me, I think that's probably the violent thing I've ever saw. What does £1 million look like? Like that. No, it depends, because if you were in Spain or in Amsterdam, then obviously the denominations there are a lot higher. So you have €500 notes, €200 notes, €100 notes. So £1 million and €500 notes looks very, very small. Whereas if you're counting them in England, you're using 50s, 20s, 10s and 5s.
You just show us what like different wedge looks like and how much it would be.
Yeah, so probably about that big would be £5 grand in 20s. Probably about that big would be £5 grand in 50s. Probably about that big would be 10s, and probably about that big would be 15s. So you could see the different denomination sizes. Obviously, 5s are always going to look a lot bigger than your 50s. What was your most dangerous moment? I think one of them was when I was about 19. Someone tried to shoot me at the back of the head. The gun jammed and just clicked. So I think that was probably one of the scariest moments I've ever had. I was only young. Obviously, I did give a couple of beatings out to people, but didn't expect one of them to come down and try and shoot me. I think the worst mistake for him was that the gun didn't go off. So obviously he got it hiding. I think that sort of made me step back a lot and think to myself, you know, that was a lucky escape. You know, I've probably been shot at 2 or 3 times. I remember having an old Ford Escort and jumped into the back of that. And when I got back, I had 3 bullet holes in the back of it. So,
what did scare you when you were active?
Do you know what? I've always been one of them. I've never grew up with any fear. So nothing's really ever scared me. I think the only thing that would ever scare me is anyone harming my family or my kids. I think that's the only thing that probably would scare me, you know, but other than that, you're in that game, you know, whatever's coming's coming. You have to take every day by every day. Did going to prison rehabilitate you? My first time in prison, it didn't rehabilitate me because I'd been caught for £60 million worth of cigarettes. It was a big haul, and because it was in the papers and stuff like that, I walked into prison as a bit of a celebrity type of thing, where people wanted to know, God, you were doing this massive, you were big at this, you were big at that. And you know what, when you go to prison, you'll meet a lot of people like yourself who have been involved in criminality, who've been importing drugs, who've been messing around with cigarettes or whatever, and before you know it, you're talking about getting out and what you're going to do moving forward. So the first time, no, it didn't rehabilitate me. My second time was a long time. I got 19 years down to a 12. But going through the Cat A units and then getting barred from prisons all around the northwest and sending me down to an island on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, yeah, it made me rehabilitate, because it was my family and my children that had to go through it, not me.
What was the most violent thing you saw in prison?
I think one of the most violent things I've seen in prison was in the Cat A unit. I seen a inmate get a full mop bucket of boiling hot water, sugar, chocolate, and it was like a syrup. I've seen it poured straight over his head. And obviously I've seen clumps of bubbles coming on his face. It basically just melted him, really. How did he get drugs into jail? Jail for me is like a cat and mouse scenario. It's for you to try and get drugs into a jail, and it's for the screws to try and stop you from getting drugs into the jail. And a lot of, I'm not saying a lot of them, but you know, a minority of a few of them will get involved in that and bring drugs into the prison. I've seen drugs coming in pigeons. I've seen drugs getting catapulted over the wall. I've seen drugs getting crossbowed over the wall. I've seen drugs now coming in with drones. I've seen drugs getting thrown over the fences and coming in socks. I've actually seen drugs come over the wall, get through, as someone's look up, it smacked them on the face, cut them and knocked them out. So I've seen different ways of getting drugs into jails. But what you have to remember is, no matter what, we've got 90,000 people who are in jail. You know, trying to keep drugs out of them jails is really difficult. And I always say, where there's a will, there's a way. People will always find a way how to get drugs into prison. Will the police ever win the war on drugs? I don't know whether they'll win the war on drugs, but they've certainly make a big dent in it. And I think technology is probably the best way and the easiest way for the police, because I think phones now are just what you call grasses, because if you get nicked with a smartphone, then obviously everything's in there. Years ago, obviously, the phones we were using, I remember my first phone was about that big, with an aerial about that big on it. It was a brick, and I think it was in 88, 89, 90. I think what everyone's trying to do is make this a cashless society. If it becomes a cashless society, then obviously it becomes better for the police. You know, there is a lot of places where cannabis now is legal. Do I think it should be legalised? I think it should be legalised, yeah, but I think the governments are too scared to legalise it because there's still money out there. And I think while there's money out there, it's going to be really, really hard to keep it away from the black market. A little bit of a tricky question. Would you legalise heroin? Would you legalise crack? I don't think so, but I think small recreational drugs, I think possibly one day they might be legalised. Who are the worst customers and why? I'd say the Scottish. I love Scottish people, but I hate Scottish money. And every time we used to sell ciggies and we had to take Scottish money, obviously we'd get charged another 3 points on it. So you've got to think about every 100 grand you'd be paying 3 grand out. Every million you'd be paying 30 grand out, and that's just because it was Scottish money. I hate jock money, but I love Scottish people, so it works both ways, doesn't it? What's your biggest regret? I think one of my biggest regrets is watching my kids go through what they had to go through while I was in prison, or watching my son's face when the police come through the door with guns, and about 30 of them. I'll never forget his face. But my biggest regret would be in watching my children having to travel all over the country and have to come and visit me because I was in jail in different parts of the world. And another one of my biggest regrets is giving drugs to people who have ended up really bad on them, and for that I apologise to anyone I did that to. I didn't really mean to do it, I just wanted to sell drugs. I didn't know what harm it caused them. There's a lot of people I have helped who have been really stuck, where now I've seen them and have had a chat with them, and you know what, I've put them on the right sort of road to like a bit of help and support, and helping a lot of them get jobs and training and move on with their lives. Last question. Would I do it all again? Oh, no, not one bit. Don't get me wrong, look, I was fortunate enough to be earning a lot of money, and I was fortunate enough to do everything I needed to do when I was young, or go everywhere or spend it on everything. You know, the stuff I was fortunate enough to do that probably any other person in criminality's never even done. So for that, I've had a life of growing up where when I was in school, if I'd have gone right and I'd have got my head down and done all my training and done all my schoolwork and done all my homework and stayed with the right people, I probably would never have got into crime. But because I wanted to be a big I am, hanging around with the lads who were always harder and could always fight, and we had a little team around us, and get into trouble every night after school or not even go to school, then I took that route. So I always know taking that route which way I was going to go. I was young, I was stupid, I was naive. I wanted to be probably Pablo Escobar when my other mate wanted to be Rocky. So, you know, I always knew what way I was going in life, and I always knew I was going to prison. It was just where, when and how. And I've done the crime, I've done my time, I've come out rehabilitated. And my advice to everyone is get out of it while you can. If you've earned money out of it, get out of it, because they will come and find you. With the brain on me now, I wouldn't go near crime at all, because crime doesn't pay, and the biggest gang in our country are the police, and you're never going to get away from them if you're on their radar.
Do you think there'll be attempts on Lucy Letby's life in prison?
I think that there are prisoners in the women's estate who will think nothing of trying to get a trophy like Lucy Letby.